The world was never meant to hold power. It was meant to worship it, to fear it, to beg from a safe distance. But humanity never learned restraint. From the moment we named the stars, we began stealing from them. Every myth tells the same story. We wanted to be gods, and the gods made sure we regretted it. It began with fire, the first sin disguised as salvation. Prometheus didn't steal it for glory. He stole it for pity. He saw humankind shivering in the dark, gnawing on raw meat and fear, and he decided to give them something the heavens had forbidden: a single spark, a weapon, a promise. And for that kindness, he was chained to a rock for eternity, his liver devoured each day by an eagle that never tired. The Greeks said Zeus punished him because he defied the gods, but that wasn't the truth. It wasn't defiance Zeus feared, it was independence. Fire made humanity unstoppable, warmth against winter, light against night, and death against death. In Polynesian myth, the demigod Maui stole flame from the underworld. In the Rig Veda, Agni was born from the friction of the world itself, a god hidden in every spark. Every culture that touched it learned the same lesson: fire doesn't belong to anyone. It only serves until it consumes. Cities burned, forests turned to ash, and the very thing that gave life also learned how to end it. That was humanity's first power, creation. And it came with its twin, destruction. But what good is creation without breath to fill it? The second power began with silence, a world sculpted but lifeless, forms without purpose. Then something exhaled. In Mesopotamia, it was the nishmat, the sacred breath of the gods that turned clay into consciousness. In Egypt, the ka, a spark of divine essence, entered every living being like a second shadow. In the Hebrew story, the Creator leaned close to dust and whispered life into its lungs. Every mythology agrees on one thing: breath is more than air. It's the tether between the mortal and the divine. To breathe is to borrow, and what is borrowed must always be returned. That's why ancient priests spoke of breath as a circle: life inhaled, death exhaled. But humanity wanted more than to receive it. They wanted to give it. In the old Jewish folktales, the rabbi of Prague molded clay into the shape of a man and wrote the word emet, truth, upon its forehead. The golem rose, obedient but soulless. It could move, it could serve, but it could never feel. When it became too dangerous, the rabbi erased a single letter, turning emet into met, death. The creature collapsed into dust. Alchemists spent centuries chasing the same breath, calling it elixir vitae or aqua ardens, the water of life. But every attempt ended the same. The spark refused to stay. They learned too late that the power to give life also carries the burden of watching it fade. Breath was never a gift meant to be passed on, only borrowed long enough to appreciate. But if you could create life, wouldn't you want to know what it becomes? That's where the third power was born: sight. Not vision as in eyes, but vision as in knowledge. The power to see what lies beyond the present. Every civilization tried to name it. The Greeks called it prophecy. The Celts called it the sight. The Norse called it wyrd, the weaving of fate itself. It began as a blessing, but it always ended as torment. In Delphi, priestesses inhaled vapors that smelled of sulfur and stars. Their eyes rolled white. Their mouths spoke the words of Apollo. Kings traveled miles to hear their fate and left shaking, because the truth was never kind. Cassandra saw the fall of Troy before a single ship set sail. The gods gave her foresight and cursed her so no one would ever believe her. Tiresias saw gods bathing, and for that vision he was blinded, given prophecy as a replacement for sight. The pattern was clear. Seeing too much meant losing everything else. Prophets didn't guide the future. They suffered beneath it. To know destiny is to be crushed by it. Every oracle, every seer, every visionary carries the same madness in their eyes, the look of someone who's seen tomorrow and realized it doesn't care about you. That was the third power, knowledge of fate, and it came with the curse of certainty. But if seeing could not save you, maybe speaking could. The fourth power was older than gods, the word. Every culture believed sound built the world. In Egypt, it was Heka, the speech of the divine, the belief that to speak was to create. In Hindu tradition, Om wasn't just a sound, it was the vibration of existence itself. In the book of Genesis, the Creator didn't carve the world, He spoke it, let there be light, and there was. Language in its purest form was power, not communication, command. The Sumerians wrote charms on clay, each word a weapon. The Babylonians believed that if you said a name perfectly, you controlled the spirit behind it. Even now, whispers of that faith linger. The names of God, the Enochian alphabet, the idea that some words aren't meant for mortal tongues, because every syllable once mattered. To speak was to sculpt, to curse was to create ruin. That's why priests performed spells in silence, and temples demanded hush before prayer. Silence wasn't reverence, it was fear, because words, once released, never die. They echo through the air, rewriting the invisible. Every curse that ever lingered, every promise that ever bound, they're just words that refuse to fade. And the cruelest truth, we still wield that power daily, pretending it's gone. The gods never took it back. They just made us forget what it means. But even the strongest word couldn't stop what came next, the oldest and most seductive of all powers, the power to return from death. Every myth, every culture, every faith tried to escape the ending, and none succeeded cleanly. Osiris was torn apart by his brother, scattered across Egypt, and stitched back together by Isis. He lived, but not as he was. He became the ruler of the dead, bound to his throne beneath the sand, forever watching the living from the other side. Orpheus walked into the underworld to bring back his love, Eurydice. He charmed Hades with his song, bent the rules of death itself. But one glance backward, one moment of doubt, and she vanished forever. In Japan, Izanagi descended into the land of the dead to retrieve his beloved Izanami, only to find her rotting, unrecognizable. He fled, horrified, sealing the path behind him, and thus, death and life were forever divided. And then there's the phoenix, the bird that dies in flame only to rise again from its own ashes. A symbol of immortality, yes, but also of repetition, because true rebirth isn't freedom, it's a loop. To live forever is to die forever. Even the gods couldn't escape that paradox. They built heavens and hells to manage eternity, but not one of them ever conquered it. The Egyptians mummified their kings to preserve their return. The Chinese buried emperors with armies of clay to continue rule beyond the grave. The Aztecs offered blood to feed the sun, because if it stopped rising, the world would die with it. Every ritual, every sacrifice, every myth about resurrection carries the same fear, that death isn't the end. It's a conversation you can't stop having. And the more humanity tried to control it, the louder it spoke back. That was the fifth power, dominion over endings. And it never belonged to us. When humanity learned it could not conquer death, it looked upward instead. The sky was always louder than the tomb, and from that sky came the next power, the storm. The Greeks called it Zeus, the Hindus called it Indra, the Norse gave it to Thor, hammer in hand, thunder in his breath. Every civilization built its fear into the clouds and gave it a name, because lightning was more than weather. It was opinion. The gods did not speak softly, they spoke in voltage, and every time they were angry, the world shook. Yet man did what he always does. He mistook warning for invitation. He studied the clouds, mapped the winds, and sent kites into lightning. Benjamin Franklin tied a key to the storm and dared it to answer. It did, and somehow he survived, grinning beneath the spark. That was the moment the heavens began losing their monopoly. The same current that burned trees would one day power cities. Thunder became energy, wrath became utility, but the trade was never equal. Because in every blackout, in every flash that splits the night, the storm reminds us, you borrowed this, not earned it. The sixth power was never control of nature. It was permission, brief, conditional, and revocable at will. And when man tired of pleading with the sky, he turned inward. If the world would not change, the self would. That's where the seventh power was born, transformation, the oldest fantasy in the world, to shed skin, to shift form, to escape the limits of the body that betrayed you. It began with gods who never needed permission. Zeus became swan and bull. Loki became a mare, birthing monsters that haunted his own people. The line between trickster and creator blurred until even the gods forgot who they were pretending to be. Humans copied them, as they always do. Shamans wore wolf pelts and whispered the animal's name until their eyes glowed in firelight. In Celtic woods, men claimed to wake with antlers. In African stories, the leopard man moved between worlds. Every culture built its own mirror for what it feared to become. Because transformation was never about freedom, it was about longing, the desire to belong to something purer, wilder, less breakable than flesh. But the gift carried poison. The werewolf howled at a moon that never answered. The selkie, shedding her sealskin, forgot which life was real. To change too often is to dissolve. The soul can only rewrite itself so many times before the ink runs dry. That was the lesson in every myth that ended with a human forgetting their own name. The seventh power wasn't evolution. It was an escape disguised as enlightenment. But there was one escape even greater, the search not to change, but to understand. The eighth power was knowledge, the most dangerous of all. It has no temples, no priests, only those who ask too many questions. Eden fell for it. Babel burned for it. Every myth ends where curiosity begins. When Prometheus stole fire, he didn't bring light, he brought awareness. When Pandora lifted her jar, she didn't unleash evil, she unleashed consequence. Knowledge is never content to stay quiet. It grows teeth. In Egypt, Thoth recorded every spell, every secret name of gods, but warned that reading all of them would drive a mortal insane. In Greece, Daedalus built wings and watched his sun melt mid-flight. In Sumer, the Apkallu taught wisdom to kings, and the flood came to erase it. The pattern never changed. Every gift of knowledge arrives with a price written in invisible ink. The gods didn't forbid it because they were cruel. They forbade it because they remembered what it did to them. Knowledge makes creators of everything it touches, and creators always end up alone. Even now, the curse continues. We know more about atoms than about mercy. We predict the weather, but not our own behavior. We write algorithms that understand us better than we understand each other. Each discovery is another bite of that same fruit. And still we hunger, because the eighth power doesn't satisfy. It seduces. The more you know, the less you sleep. The light gets brighter, and everything human looks smaller in its glare. But some knowledge doesn't come from books or stars. It comes from blood. The ninth power was written into our veins long before we learned to write at all. Blood remembers. It carries history like a song passed between generations. In Africa, they call it Ashe, the divine force that moves through living things. In Greece, they called it Ichor, the golden lifeblood of gods. In Rome, soldiers swore by their own veins. In China, ancestors were fed through cups of wine spilled on graves because blood was both message and offering. Every oath, every sacrifice, every coronation, all of them required it because blood was proof. Not metaphor, not symbol, evidence. Kings cut their palms to seal alliances. Lovers mingled veins to promise forever. Even betrayal was measured in it. Cain and Abel's story wasn't about jealousy. It was about inheritance, about what the earth remembers when it drinks from family hands. The soil never forgets who fed it. That's why ancient curses always begin with kin. Blood feuds stretch across centuries because the wound isn't in the flesh, it's in the lineage. It's the one form of power that doesn't fade when the body does. You can burn a temple and bury a name, but blood keeps whispering its story beneath the dirt. Every war, every empire, every dynasty is just blood reorganizing itself into new flags. And even now, in a world of laws and logic, we still say things like bloodline, blood oath, blood debt. The language remembers what the mind pretends to forget. That was the ninth power, not the magic of blood, but the memory of it. And then, beyond all these mortal inventions, there was the last, the one power that never needed stealing because it already owned everything. Time, the first and final element, the god that makes gods obsolete. Kronos devoured his children to stop them from taking his throne, but time has no throne. It doesn't rule, it consumes. Every myth ends because of it. Every prophecy fulfills itself by running out of seconds. Time is not cruel, it's efficient. In Hindu lore, Kali dances on the corpses of her own worshippers, not out of malice, but because endings are part of her rhythm. In Norse tales, Ragnarok isn't tragedy, it's maintenance. The universe clears its throat before beginning again. The Egyptians carved the sun's journey into loops, believing day and night were just breathing. Inhale, exhale, repeat. That was their mercy. Even gods must rest, but humanity can't accept rest. We count time, trap it in clocks, dissect it into hours, minutes, microseconds. We made the infinite measurable, and then wondered why it felt so small. We built calendars to cage it, calendars to control it. But calendars don't hold time, they hold us. Every civilization tried to bribe it. The Romans built monuments to outlast it. The Chinese built walls. The Mayans built calendars that ended and began again. Yet time keeps walking. barefoot and patient, stepping over empires like stones in a river. Even eternity isn't immune, because the longer forever lasts, the more it starts to decay. The stars burn down to blackness, mountains grind into dust, and the myths that once shook the earth become bedtime stories no one fully believes. That's time's quiet cruelty, not that it kills, but that it erases meaning one grain at a time. And yet, it's the only power that forgives. Fire punishes, breath fades, sight torments, word binds, death waits, storms strike, forms shatter, knowledge blinds, blood remembers. But time forgets. It wipes the slate, turns tragedy into history, history into myth, and myth back into silence. It's not mercy, it's balance. We think we're modern, we think we've outgrown the myth. But every time lightning cuts the sky, every time we breathe, every time we dream of immortality, we are just retelling the same story. The story of powers borrowed from eternity, held too tightly by hands too small. And if the old gods are watching, they must laugh, quietly, kindly, because they know we will never stop trying. That's what makes us human, not our limits, but our refusal to believe in them. In the end, all 10 powers are still here. Fire still burns, breath still moves, sight still warns, words still wound, death still waits, storms still rage, bodies still change, knowledge still tempts, blood still binds, and time still wins, always.